In this session, we want to discuss the criteria that is used in the firewall rules. The firewall works by examining each packet entering your network and leaving the network. And the packet is compared to the rules that are set for the firewall, because these rules will specify which packets are allowed to pass through your firewall and which packets are blocked. The three most important criteria that the firewalls can use would be the IP addresses, the protocol numbers, and the port numbers. Let's take a look at what that means. Let us start with the IP address. The IP address would be the specific address for the computer or the host on the network. So when you're configuring the firewall rule, you can say that you want to allow or block a specific IP address number, or you can put in a range of IP addresses, in which case the rule will block or allow that range of IP addresses. The protocol numbers, they specify whether or not you're going to use a TCP or UDP protocol. TCP and UDP protocols are communication protocols that are used for network packets. For the TCP packet, you will see that the TCP packet will be used if you are using a large amount of data, such as files exchanged by the web and print servers. And then UDP is used for brief message exchanges, such as DNS and DHCP transactions. Let's take a look at a very simple network package. A network package consists of what we call an IP header and a TCP header. And then you have the data. After the data, there's usually what we call a trailer. And the trailer is part of the packet that looks at errors. So for the IP header, we have the source and the destination address. And then the TCP or UDP, we have the port numbers. And then there is the data. So when a message is sent across the network, the message is in the form of a data packet. And then the firewall rule, when it is set now, can use any of these to allow or block or filter data as it leaves or comes into your network. Again, the port numbers in the TCP section specify the application running on the computer. The most common firewall rules use port numbers to specify the types of application traffic the computer is allowed to send or receive. For example, HTTP port 80 is used by the web server. That's how your web server will receive its incoming packets to that port number. Firewall rules can function in two ways, as you know. It can admit traffic or it can block traffic. And we have discussed this before. You can decide whether you're going to use the default rule. You can block all the traffic and then only allow that traffic that you want. Or you can allow all the traffic, and then when you do that, you would then have to go in and say, well, I want this to be an exception, or I want to block this. I think we had said that Blocking all the traffic sometimes proves to be a little problematic because you don't know the dependencies of some programs. Let us take a look at a firewall rule. We're going to look at the inbound rules. So we're going to right click on inbound rules and say new rule. What type of rule would you like to create? And we're going to go ahead and do a custom rule. Click on custom. Then we're going to click next. And here we are asked, does this rule apply to all programs or to a specific program? And we're going to leave all programs and click on next. To which port and protocol does this rule apply? So for our protocol, we're going to click the down arrow and we're going to choose TCP/IP. For the port, we're going to click the down arrow by all ports and we're going to say specific ports because we actually want to use a particular port number. We're going to type port 80, which is the HTTP port. And then for the remote port, we're going to click that down arrow. We're going to choose specific ports. And we're going to use 80 again. So we have for the protocol type TCP, we have for the local port 80, we have for the remote port 80. Then we're going to go ahead and click next. Which local IP addresses does this rule apply to? And we can choose a specific IP addresses or we can say any IP address. So we're going to leave it at the any IP address both for local and remote. And we're going to go ahead and click next. What action should be taken when a connection matches the specified conditions? And here we get to allow or block. And we can also allow the connection if it is secure. That is, if it is secured by IP security. And we had talked about that, about the connection security rules. For our example here, we're going to click on block the connection. And then we're going to select next. When does this rule apply? When a computer is connected to the corporate domain, when the computer is connected to a private network, or when the computer is connected to a public network. And as I said before, you can use all three profiles. So we're going to use all three profiles in our example. So we're going to go ahead and click next. The firewall name that we're going to give for this rule is Firewall Rule for Contoso. And we're going to click on Finish. We can see the rule here, Firewall Rule for Contoso. Let's go to right click on the rule and go into its properties. Maybe we want to make some changes. We can make changes to the protocols and ports by clicking on the Protocol and Ports tab. And you see here we can change the type. We can change the port. If we wanted to change scope, we can click on Scope. And we can change the scope here too. So after you create the rule, you can go to the properties of that rule and you can change your criteria. So we have looked at some of the criteria that we would want to use in the firewall rule. So please bear that in mind. You don't have to do a lab for this particular assignment because we already looked at some firewall rules in a previous session. But I want you to remember the criteria that we used for configuring the rules. This is the end of the session. I want to thank you for listening.